Go to the beach. Get the job done. Go to the woods.
Luke is a shop owner in England. He is such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to biking, but more importantly in this conversation, cargo bikes. Luke also was fortunate to get a first look at the Orox because we helped with some of the launch videos and content creation and building the bikes and maintaining them. Tell us about your shop and kind of your place in, the biking world, but then the cargo bike world.
Yeah, for sure. So the store that I co-own has been in business for a little over 40 years. I've not been there that whole time, so I've been there about 20. And I guess the real roots of that business when it first really started to flourish was folding bicycles, which at the time were really niche, really weird, sort of funny little circus bikes, and which now is just the norm. They're everywhere. So as cargo bikes started to really become more available in quality contexts rather than just the kind of the Dutch ones that are really rickety, it was a really logical step for us to look at something that was, again, feeling quite niche, but really, it's something that's going to grow and take people, mobility, allow people to move around rather than just being bicycles. So at the store, we do pretty much everything from full high-end sports, race and road bikes, mountain bikes, kids bikes, hybrids, the whole thing. But certainly for us, our main feel is very much towards getting people out and moving, and that micromobility is obviously really where we're at is our main thrust.
Luke was kind of behind the scenes in England where the Orox photos and video launch content creation happens. What was your impression when these bikes first arrived for you to unbox them and accessorize and test ride?
Yeah, it's interesting because in some ways you think it'd be a bit like, oh wow, shocking, Tern have suddenly made big wheeled bikes that are off-road capable, whereas everything to this date's been relatively small wheeled with a few exceptions and relatively tarmac or asphalt based. But actually it didn't feel strangely like a massive departure. It did feel quite logical. It wasn't necessarily what I was expecting because we got the bikes blind essentially. Our first finding out really was just unboxing them. But it wasn't such a radical thing in some ways because it feels like that's where Tern have always been at every step of the way, is saying, well, okay, we've got this tool, like the folding bikes are a tool for a job, and it's not driven by fashion, it's not driven by almost personal desires, as I see it. It's more driven by that ability to be a functional tool for the task at hand. And the Orox is exactly that. It's another functional tool in the Tern stable, but obviously very biased to people who are going to do more. You're going to take this bike further and do more crazy things. They're going to come out with all those stories. But a bike, you step back a little bit, you look at something like the GSD, and that was just the same. That was a really, it was a bike to do more. Your choice before that in terms of getting your kids around some lumpy box bike or something flimsy or not really suited, and the Tern GSD was this real solid thing that just arrived and had all these features and functionality, and the Orox just feels like a big brother to that. It's just a heavier hitter, I guess. So So in some ways surprising, but equally kind of almost not surprising.
That's such an interesting way of thinking about it, because you've been along since the folding bike launch of Tern, I assume, and then some of their bikes like the Verge. That was my first intro to Tern. I was like, oh, this rides solid. Like it rides like a bike. While I was used to folding bikes feeling like I was going to get a flat tire or do something to my front wheel. And then the iteration from the Verge to the Vectron was the same for me, where I was like, like an e-bike doesn't have to feel big and heavy. And then
absolutely,
it iterated the same way to the GSD. And what you're saying right now, like as a mechanic, makes sense. And unboxing the Orox, it was very much like, okay, you definitely want to lift for this bike.
Yeah.
But the rest of it, like the accessories, the kickstand, all those things, it was still using everything we know from a shop and bike shop mechanic, like the DNA of like, okay, like I can figure this out very easily.
Yeah. There's nothing weird in the Orox. It's kind of, it's normal. It's very normal. Where some of the features of things, some of the folding bike features and stuff like that can be quite unique. While the Orox obviously is clearly a unique bicycle, the basic bones of it are bike. They're going to be real simple for people to work on, maintain at home, all that kind of stuff, which is good. It's interesting you touched on the Vectron, because the Vectron for me is a really interesting bike in that it's an electric bike and it's a folding bike. It's not necessarily a folding electric bike or an electric bike that folds. It's like you can just ride it as an electric bike. It's perfect for that. But it does also fold, and it's a perfect folding bike. And the Orox has that same weird thing going on, where it's clearly an adventure fat bike, but it's clearly a cargo bike as well. And one doesn't seem to trump the other. It's this bike that does both things, not to the detriment of either. So when I first looked at the Orox, I did that thing. You put it side on and you kind of step back from it and you take a little look. And I was like, wow, that's really big. And then I was like, well, actually, if I just cut that bit of rack off the back end, man, it suddenly doesn't look very big at all. It just looks like a fat bike. It looks like a bike that I could quite happily go and trail ride with. It's just the rack's making it look strange. But obviously the rack's going to allow it to carry all this gear. And so suddenly it's like, well, actually, it's not intimidating. It's not actually a big thing. Mountain bikes are getting bigger and bigger and bigger all the time. And actually you stand a full suspension trail bike next to it, and there's not a lot of difference in terms of length. So it's, which again, like the GSD, when you put a normal bike next to a GSD, it's like, oh, hang on a minute, this 700C hybrid is longer. Wait, what? And it's, so it's that same thing. We've got a loads of utility in a bike that is both packages. It's both an electric bike, a cargo bike. It's all these things, but without one trumping the other, which is, or limiting the other, I think.
What was your first ride like?
So my first ride was in the dark, because obviously they were still embargoed. And our store was like right in the centre of town. So, based at a railway station with the bus station right there. So it's the hub of everything. So it doesn't matter what time of day it is, there's people everywhere. And we sell a lot of Terns. So actually, you walk out our front door, and in the bike racks dotted around the station, there's Terns. They're everywhere. So trying to sneak out without someone spotting it was this is gonna be tricky. So waited till fairly late and went for a quick spin, and that was like maybe a 15-minute ride, just straight up town and straight back down again. Managed to cut across some cobbles and might have found some steps to go down. My impression was that it rides like basically how I expected it to, like a fat bike, not like a long bike. A bit, again, like the GSD, anyone who's familiar with that bike rides like a bicycle, not really like a long bike. I mean, it has some slight differences from a conventional cycle, but it's not so dramatic. Again, in some ways, it's that there was no adjustment really. So it was kind of quite flat neutral. Sort of like, this is just what I'm expecting. It's stable, rolls over stuff nicely. Surprise, surprise. And it feels like home. It feels like a bike you're happy to ride. Obviously, working in the workshop, so I cut my time maybe 50-50 between the workshop and the shop front in terms of my face-to-face time customers, and then with bikes and mechanicking. But that means every day I'm just riding lots and lots of different bikes, and I can ride just the length of the shop or the length of the car park behind us, and you instantly know whether a bike is wrong. You can feel it. They feel strange. It's like, so, hey, there's something wrong with this bike, or this is odd. And obviously none of those feelings with the Orox. Just feels nice and stable. And all the touch points, I think that was interesting. Instantly, it was just like, ergon saddle, nice little flared ergon grips, and the Syntace bar, it's just got that nice tiny bit of sweep on it. And it just feels good. It all just, just lands, and it feels like home.
The thing that really surprised me, because I was riding these 115-pound bikes off-road in Colorado. Yeah. It's a massive bike and it's heavy. The second you start riding it, it's tracking right, it's steady, it feels great, even with a load on the back. But you do have to respect it.
Yeah. Again, for me, because I'm handling bikes all the time and big bikes a lot, I didn't personally struggle with that, and I'm not a big guy. I'm like 120 pounds, the Americans, like 8 stone for people in the UK. So I guess for me, it didn't feel that hard to maneuver. But like you say, that kind of, you do need a little bit of respect for these bigger bikes, particularly if you're just going to dive straight into off-road. You don't want to just be like, hey, let's chuck the 2 kids and the dog on it and go hit the trail. It's like, yeah, maybe go ride it on your own first a few times. But I think that's the same with the GSD. When we have customers come to ride those, quite often people are really keen just to start piling all the kids on, and it's kind of, when did you last actually ride a bike with a kid on the back? And I'm like, never. Okay, well, maybe just go do 10 minutes on your own, then come back. Had some kids, and I think there's certainly that element of like you say, being respectful of the thing, because it is heavy and it is long, so you need to get a feel for that. Just I guess in the same way that if you're moving from your regular car and you hire a van for the day to move some stuff, you kind of have to think about what you're doing.
That's a good analogy.
But it's not crazy, and it rides. Like I say, I think it rides as you expect. It's not weird. Sometimes you get on some cargo bikes, box bikes and things like that, and it's a really steep learning curve, and it can be a bit traumatic actually for some people when you jump on something that's just snaking around. It's fishtailing or whatever. And the Orox definitely doesn't do that. It's really stable. In fact, I had to go and look at the specs because I was convinced that the steerer maybe had like a visco headset in it or something that was giving it this real nice, kind of stable steering. And I was surprised that it didn't. It was like, it's a nice FSA headset in there, but this feels really good. It's a nice bike.
I've ridden fat bikes, and something that a lot of folks are asking online, they're like, why didn't you do a suspension fork? And I have to say to people, like, you have 4 inches of suspension here. And to your point of like that handling, that tire, like that also is adding to the stability on the front end of, like depending what pressure you're running it. Have you experienced that at all with like media coming back? Or because whenever I send out media bikes, they always ask the most interesting questions.
No, actually, all the magazines and people that we've put, had bikes in and out for, no one said anything much about the lack of suspension. And actually, I think, interestingly for us here in the UK, stuff wears really badly in our climate because we just put huge amounts of really awful salt down our roads in the winter. And the council it seems like the councils like to grit just before it rains as well, so it becomes really slushy, because they're never quite sure when we get ice, and that stuff it really does destroy bikes. It's like living on a coastal location. I think that seems to be the case right across the UK, as far as I can tell. And so a suspension fork, quite often they suffer really badly on bikes that are used in an urban environment. So ironically, when you're seeing these big E mountain bikes, whether they're actually being mountain bikes, whether they're actually going on trail or they're just being ridden in town. You can actually tell the difference because they have all this sort of pitting in the stanchions and all that kind of thing. So actually, I suspect a lot of the reviewers probably just like, rigid fork, that makes perfect sense. And obviously then with the fact that this bike clearly is going to be taken just way beyond where a lot of people might think they would want to take a cargo bike, it's definitely going to be, I think we're going to see some amazing videos and see some amazing stories from the first batches of owners of these bikes. But if you're out in the field, if you're riding, you're really off in the boonies, you don't want a suspension fork that's just going to suddenly lose air or compress and not come back up again, or have some issues to a rigid fork. To me, makes perfect sense. And then stick the big chubby tire on it. Well, it's all the suspension you need for the kind of riding you're doing. It's not a bike for going jumping. It's a keep contact with the ground bicycle, so you don't need lots of squishy suspension in that way once you've got that big tire on there.
The UK, I mean, I'll give a shout out to Sean from the UK. I don't remember. I think he's like in the northern section.
Sheffield. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah. He's on the Facebook GSD groups, and he loves his GSD, but he definitely pushes it to the extreme.
Absolutely.
The other frequently asked questions that I've been seeing is like passenger carrying and just general, like, where does this fit and why is it so expensive? and as a shop owner, maybe you can speak to it, but like in my world, mountain bikes, I have a neighbor that bought like an $11,000 mountain bike without thinking about it's just his sport. Yeah. He went out and did it. It doesn't carry anything. It doesn't have battery.
No,
it's just for him to go recreating.
Yeah, I do. Yes, yeah, I don't perceive the bike as being particularly expensive, and I know that's kind of a crazy thing to say because obviously it is a lot of money and it's relative to you can go and buy a £100 bicycle that will work. It'll let you ride around. You can buy a £2,000 or a £3,000 electric bicycle with Yamaha or Shimano or Bosch or something on it, and it will work. But equally, in the same way, you can go and pick up a basic Ford car, or you can pick up a Tesla, or it's just a different part of the scale and the capability of a bike like this, and the way that I don't think any stone has been left unturned. In terms of the design, a bit like when the GSD, the Gen 1 hit. A lot of people were just like, don't get that. It's like, whoa, this is going to be huge. It was just obvious that was going to be just massive for me. And then back then, I can't remember what that was in the UK when it first launched. It was like £4,000, I think, at the time. And people were like, £4,000? No way. And then obviously promptly everything that came in the first batch was sold. And some of the European stores were saying, we'll take a whole container. We won't take a handful. The people were ordering them in the same kind of volume that distributors would want to order product. And that was small independent stores. And so the Orox, similarly for me, it's that thing that it's well designed, it's tough, it's gone through the most stringent tests. There's, like I say, no stone left unturned. I'm really excited to see all the little things that I've yet worked out on the bicycle, because there's going to be because there always is with Tern products. You spot a couple of holes here or a little thing there, and you're like, huh. And then at some point, someone goes, oh, yeah, this is for, or we've just added, or you could. And you go, no way. Yeah, that's what I want to do. That's amazing. So on the Orox, you've got one behind you there, and it's not really visible because you've got the side guards on. But there's these little holes all the way along that just look like they're perfectly spaced for batten straps. So you can just slide your straps through, whether it be, to tie stuff down.
I can show things as you talk.
Yeah, and those little things that, people will do yourself. So, like the fork, as an example, you've got your anything cage mounts up front. Obviously, let's go to the back of the bike. But yeah, lurking along that rail somewhere in the center there.
There's that strap. I don't know if you can see this right here. There's that right there.
Yeah. Exactly. And then I think there's a couple more further up as well. There's just some small little holes kind of like midsection, and you think that's gonna be great. Just running a tie through, and it's such a simple thing, but it would be so easily not added. And then at the front, obviously you've got the three classic anything cage, sort of mount up there. But then if you add that trail rack up the front, obviously the rack sits across those. But then obviously the trail rack's got more bottle bosses further up the rack, so you can then still put a bottle up front on both sides and fit your panniers. And they're small little details, but they add up overall. And all those little thought processes that design guys are going through, and girls, it takes time and it takes investment and good tooling and partnering with the right supply chain and the right manufacturing points. And that all it does build in cost, but it builds in value. You get what you pay for. So again, jumping back to GSD, I've got a Gen 1 GSD, which has been my personal bike. That's been superseded with the Gen 2. I'd like a Gen 2, of course, but I don't feel sad about the fact that I'm riding around on the Gen 1 because it's brilliant. It works super well, and there's all the forward and backward compatibility of parts. Every time Tern launches new things, so much of it is rearward compatible. And then now in this case, with the Orox, a lot of stuff that's GSD and HSD is suddenly forward compatible into a whole new product line. It's brilliant. I love that attention to detail.
You said something about comparing it to cars here in the US. I typically compare it to like Subaru or Volvo. Where it's like it's a more premium product, but it's that bike or car you're going to pass on to your kids because it's going to last so long.
Yeah,
and it just depends on where you are in your bike journey. If you've been riding a cargo bike and you realize like Sean up in Sheffield, like what he could do with his bike, and now what is possible on this bike, that's an easier transition.
Yeah, completely.
I see a lot of folks, I will download your video and put it over here because your video was amazing of just all the different things you can do with it. But I think that's going to be the aha moment for people, but more so for shops. So many shops that sell e-mountain bike are sport minded, I want to, like, how fast can you go? Oh, you're a mountain biker. You want to stay in mountain biking. But this bike is really going to open up people's minds of like trail building, or you and your fishing snorkeling gear was amazing.
Yeah.
Go exploring. Go to the beach. Get the job done. Go to the woods. Last mile delivery. Take 2 kids. Head out in the rain. Have a snow day. Go party! You can even take the kitchen sink.
The aim of that video was to just show the versatility of the bike. And it's something that we know in Tern product already. When you look at what goes back to the Vectron again, a folding e-bike, but you can put a decent basket up front or bag. You can fit a kid on the back. Like, that's pretty radical. Doesn't sound radical, but go and find another good folding bike or small electric bike that you can put a kid on the back. And then you've got the tail standing and the folding bar and all this stuff. And that just, snakes its way right up through the brands, through GSD, HSD, and again now onto Orox, which is exciting.
Yeah. I always tell folks, if I only could have one e-bike, it would be a Vectron.
Yeah.
Just, you can throw it in. I think you guys call it a boot of a car, the trunk.
Yeah, the boot trunk. Yeah.
And you don't have to have a fancy rack, and it fits everyone in the family. And I love the Vectron for sure. And is there anything from your standpoint, from where you are in your customer base, who do you think the most common person for that early adoption, like that, let's say the first 3 to 6 months, who do you see knocking on your door?
I don't think I could even call that. Like, I really couldn't.
And how long have you been doing this? Because I think that says a lot about the bike.
So I've been in the bike trade 22 years, 23 years, somewhere around that sort of time. And I think if this bike was not electric, you'd just be like, 35-year-old men, yes. White men. That would be the demographic. As soon as you make it electric and you make it capable of actually truthfully carrying gear in a real way, it could be anybody, literally anybody, from some aged painter who's going to want to carry his easel down the canal to paint watercolors or oil paints or something, right the way through to some mum who's just like, I'm taking the kids to school every day and we're doing it down as a bit of forest track or as a canal path, or through to someone like myself who's going to be like, well, I'm going to drop one of my kids to school, and then there happens to be a really nice mountain bike trail that I could take, takes me out of the city and back down into the city. Suddenly I can get a whole bunch more trail time that I wouldn't have been getting before, because I would have either walked the kids to school and then come back home and grabbed the road bike, or I'd taken the GSD and then carried on the road. So it's kind of anybody. That'd be interesting. That will be interesting to see who that is, what that customer looks like. I think that the first batches of these bikes, there'll be a huge number. I say a huge number. The first people through the gate, a lot of people will buy 2. I think is what happens. There'll be people with good disposable income. Like I said, they're not cheap, and they will be people who probably are coming off of bikes like GSDs or Urban Arrows, Bullets, things like that, and they'll be saying, this bike actually ticks all the boxes I want it to, but now we're both having one, whether that be partners, mum, dad, whatever, because they're going to be used, not switched over quite so much. Obviously, absolutely can be, but I think people will want this bike for themselves. rather than it being like the station wagon car. It's going to be it's going to be there's a certain desirability for self ownership, which is interesting because obviously the GSD, one of its really big selling features has always been that ability for you just to lend it out to anyone in the family. Everyone can fit this bike, everyone can ride this bike, and obviously everybody can ride the Orox, but you're not going to want to be lending it just like you don't lend your nice mountain bike or your nice racing bike. I think people are going to so I think there'll be lots of pairs of these sold to people.
I realize you have better access there, but here it also is allowing me to ride utility trails, just where power lines and sewer access that
sure.
I've tried on my GSD and it was too many like gullies and just not good on 20-inch wheels.
Yeah.
Accessory wise, what are you thinking of, like, what's going to be the ones that are hot tickets? Because I remember when the GSD came out and like you couldn't get some accessories because we didn't realize what would be hot.
So we actually when GSD, when the first GSD came out, obviously there was some accessories, and obviously more and more just got
bags and a front rack.
Bags, front rack, side decks, and those little pop out foot pegs, and maybe and seat pads, and then that was kind of everything. And then Clubhouse came maybe 5 months later, and and so that was quite easy to navigate the growth of that product. And then Gen 2 GSD for us here in the UK, and I don't know if this was the same everywhere, but it felt like a whole load of extra options kind of landed with it. And for us, it was pretty straightforward. It was like, we just need to order all of it and lots of it, because we're not going to get stuck with it. These bikes are going to keep selling. And that's been the case for us. We've always had a really high inventory of these, these kind of small parts.
And I think that's, to me, when I see a good Tern shop, you walk in and they have the accessories.
Yeah.
It's not just, here's the bike, tell us what you want and we'll order in the accessories. It's an interesting difference, because as I visit bike shops, there's some folks that are just dipping their toe into electric or cargo and they're cautious, and it's like, hey, you need this on your floor decked out to sell the experience.
I think if there's a store that isn't carrying lots of this stuff, so for our store, you walk in and at any given moment there's going to be at least 6 GSDs on display in the shop, and one of those will be dressed up ready to go ride, and others will be maybe dressed up or tail standing, and then out the back there's loads of bikes and accessories. But I think if a store is dipping their toe into Orox or dipping their toe into GSD, they definitely want to have a bike that is fully kitted out, because that's the only way to understand the bicycle. I think it would be strange to go to a car dealership and the guy's like, oh yeah, you could have electric windows, but winds them down. It would be odd. So
we can have a back seat, but we have to.
We'll install it later. Yeah, absolutely. So I think having this it's essential. It's no different from trying to sell a bike and not have tires on it. Almost, you need the stuff to dress it out. So with Orox, we'll probably carry product as quickly as it arrives, in terms of the new options. But there's so much stuff that's already forward compatible from the existing product lines with the most recent Clubhouse and captain's chairs and all that stuff. It's nice that there isn't going to be too much weirdness, and all the different pannier sizes. I'm excited about the new pannier, and that sounds ridiculous. That's the thing I'm most excited about. It's the big pannier. You can put it everything.
I'm excited about the stow decks.
Stow decks are amazing,
are so cool.
and the combination of that with the pannier being you can just pop them up and you've got much tighter clearances, which is it's really simple. And that little pull button at the back, it's so deceptively simple, but it's just really, really nice to use, really tactile, which is great.
Yeah, and you did say the cargo hold 72s, and as you were talking, I was picturing, before getting them in my hands, I was trying to brainstorm, okay, like how would I mount a chainsaw, like a small hand, like 10-inch bar, and like some of the hand gear that I would want to go out to do basic trail work or, around land, basic work. And then those 72s came in and I was like, it just all fits inside. Like I don't even have to mount them to the deck. I was really surprised.
The thing I haven't tried, and I'd be interested to see, is whether you can get a folded like a Vectron or something into one of those. I don't know if that fits, so I'm not sure.
Probably standing on its rear. I think that's the most compact.
Yeah, maybe. So the current GSD panel, the 52, I always forget the literage. I'm terrible. Numbers and names, not good, not good with either of those things. So the 52s, you can drop a Brompton just really nicely into their folder, and it's really convenient. And so I've done that quite a few times. I've had people I need to pick up somewhere, and it's like, wow, one of you can jump on the back, and the other one can take a Brompton, and it just goes in. So I'll be excited if that can work as well for a Vectron or a Link, being able to just drop one of those. I haven't tried. I hope so.
I don't have a Vectron, but I would try it. And the Stodex can hold 77 pounds, so that's more than enough to hold a Vectron.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You kept saying something that reminded me. These bikes also stand on their tail, which is something. Like I was like, well, it's a Tern. Of course, it stands vertically. And then I got a flat on the side of the trail. And these things are massive. And typically on a mountain bike, I flip over onto my saddle and handlebars, which you could do on here. And I actually moved my kiosk so I could do it a little bit easier. And that's how typically I would change a flat, just so I don't, have stuff all over my chain. And then I was like, I'm going to stand it vertically and lash it to a tree. So I did all the work. And the bike wasn't on its handlebars. It was so nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's one of the things I actually quite liked about working on them is just the relative ease of getting components from the bike. I think a couple of the media reviews that have gone out for the UK, there's been a little bit of talk of difficulty with removing wheels, and sure, there's a big rack at the back and panniers that there's stuff there. So of course, there's a little bit more jumping through some hoops in the same way that if you want to take a wheel off the back of your Jeep, you just pull the cover off and off it comes. If you want to get it out of your town car, you've got to get all your luggage out of the boot and pop the hatch and get in. And so there's a little bit more to do, but the actual mechanics of doing so is not tricky or not particularly tricky, and being able to stand it up on its end makes that a lot easier to do those things with what is a heavy bike. So my preference, if I'm on trail or on the road and I have, I'm fortunate to suffer a flat. It's been a very long time since I've had a flat on anything, just because most of my bikes are tubeless. But it's if that happens, generally I try not to turn my bike upside down because I don't scuff the saddle and mark the bars and all that kind of stuff. But when you get onto an e-bike, that becomes a lot more challenging because they're just heavy, and so quite often the practical solution is to turn them upside down, even though you kind of grimace at doing so and think, oh, am I scratching the shifters, whatever it might be.
Or the display.
But with this, it's easily done. So just being able to stand it up on its rear end is great. And one of the things I've really enjoyed with the Orox, because for us at the store, we're just absolutely at capacity. The shop is just packed with customers' bikes and bikes in, bikes out, and it's and that's just on the ones on display, and then you've got all the stuff out the back, and we've got a really big shop. Well, I say really big, relatively by an independent standard, it's a big space. So we've kind of got kind of warehousing and the main shop side by side, and some off-site stuff as well. But it's always a jigsaw puzzle making everything fit. So generally, when HSDs, GSDs, when they come into the building for service and that kind of stuff, predominantly, unless they've got a curved bar on the back of the clubhouse, they will get stood on their bottoms. They just take up way less space. And so obviously that was the first thing, with the Orox, was like, once we got them out of the boxes and they were built, and then it was time to quickly move on to something else, well, they just instantly were up on their tails. But I really like the configuration of the feet at the back of the bike. So you've got those there's two kind of nylon feet at the back, the two round. I assume nylon. They don't feel like nasty plastic. They feel quite nice.
Yeah.
And then you've got the rubber bumper further up, which is a reverse from the current GSD, the Gen 2 GSD. And what's really good with that on this is you can get it up on that quite easily. But then if you've got a floor that's relatively flat and not gritty, so if you've got a wooden floor, laminate floor, polished concrete, painted floor in your garage or whatever, you can just rock it just onto those two little feet and actually just kind of walk it around. So even though it's heavy, it's got a really nice balance point and it's just quite easy to just
You're dancing. I picture you dancing with the Orox.
You're just kind of just shooting it. That dance you do with a fridge freezer when you're trying to get it out of the gap it lives in.
Yes.
So you can just shimmy it around, and that I really like that. And then as soon as you obviously get that rubber bumper into contact with the ground, then it's just rock solid. It can't be, it can't slide at all. And again, that's the kind of attention to detail. When it would be really easy to go, well, on the GFD we put the rubber here and the lugs higher up. So let's just do that. But no doubt somebody's thought about this. Those kind of little design details don't happen by mistake. And then on the GSD, that rubber bumper at the bottom, if you're getting it up onto its bottom, you've got all the gear on there and a big rack up front with some heavy chain lock in it. Because that rubber bumper hits the ground first, it just gives it instant grip. So that last bit of pull, that's the hard bit, it's not going to slide. It just sticks and up it goes. So whereas with this, you've got that bigger wheel, so it's just easier to roll over. So tiny details that add up to the package, and when those details are done right, you don't necessarily notice them because they're just right. They just work. So why would you notice them? They just do what they do. And then you grab something a copy of or an inferior iteration of, and you go, it doesn't do that, or this is rubbish. So actually, that's some of the stuff you're paying for. It's tiny details, but they add up to the whole of the experience, and you're not left frustrated. It's joyful. And that's, you see that in the GSD, you see that in HSD owners who they come back through the store, they come in for that first service, they're 6 weeks into their new bicycle, coming back to have it just tweaked up and checked over, and someone will, come through and it is just like, this bike has changed my life. And it's like, well, hang on, we're 6 weeks in, you know that already, and that's because there have been either none or so few resistors in the path of them using this bike, because it's well thought through and well executed. And the Orox has that same DNA, that Tern DNA of well thought through and well executed. And you see that even right back into the folding bikes with Tern. You look at something like a Vectron, or you look at any of the higher end analog folding bicycles, and you can just feel those quality points in the hinges and how they work. And then you look at right down at the bottom end, like where the links are, and obviously there has to be, you can't make everything to the Tesla standard, as it were, because it's just not possible to do that price point. And when you look at some of those lower value bikes, I don't like saying that because it makes them sound like they're not good.
Yeah,
but the DNA is still in there. It's the best it can be at the price point you get to buy this thing at, and that's amazing. It's a real it's a testament, I think, to how well designers work and the care that's put in. And I guess that's care all the way from the top of the Tern family, all the way through to filtering down that people want it to be right and everyone to have a good experience, not just shifting units or box pushing and saying, "Oh, we'll put a big price tag on it because we can." And so you see that in the Orox for sure.
And I didn't understand or appreciate. Folks always say the DNA, and I didn't appreciate that until I was on the Tern side of the table. From the dealer side of the table, it was like, you just make stuff that makes sense, and those details kind of go through. But it's also the DNA of, the team, where, this bike is Yo-Yo and Pasi, who are two of our designers in Finland, and Yo-Yo is the original. He was with the team since day one, and some of our other designers have been day one. But then they brought on Pasi, who brought new ideas, but he was also part of this, I don't want to call it brainwashing, but like DNA washing of doing it right. And here's why these details are currently on these other bikes. It's not just like coming to it with a new idea and just creating something new. It's, hey, understand the rest of the bikes that have come before it, and what can we learn from it, from the folding bike technology to your point about the vertical standing, and making sure that those details are part of how the design team thinks, and not just, hiring somebody in and, oh, you have a great idea, let's run with it. It's more like, these bikes will be baked in-house for 5 years before you even get a hint of them.
Yeah,
And sometimes things that you're learning about, when the Orox was being designed, that's where the Clubhouse Gen 3 was being thought of, because it has to be in a different position. And that allowed it to iterate as the new child seats were changing, and you'll see the design influences from the Orox on bikes that have already come out, because they were iterating so long on this bike. And so when people say DNA, it's like, you have no idea like how and from the accessories, they're thinking about making things retroactive on bikes that we've already created that now need to be designed for a bike that you're not going to see for 3 years.
I think that it's that family of bikes. It is a family of bikes, and when you look at big bike manufacturers generally, I think their bikes are not a family of bicycles. There's some road bikes, and there's some mountain bikes, and there's now some cargo bikes, and you look at them and you say, well, how these things don't relate, and that's fine. They don't need to. But then you look at, say, a cargo bike's a great example. Like, you look at that from a big brand who's suddenly dipping their toe, and you go, yeah, it works. But will there be any more product development for this model line, or will it just get axed in 2 years' time, and then you're on your own and you can't buy spares, and you're like, I would have really liked to have bought the panniers. Oh, they don't make them. Oh, nothing fits. And with Tern, there's always that, this kind of cross compatibility across the model lines, and the amount of effort going into building, designing and having made Tern's own product. So like the panniers are a great example of that, and the clubhouses. It's not just going and saying, well, yeah, we could stick some alt leaves on here. Well, yeah, you can, because it works. So if you like an alt leaf, brilliant. But actually, there's this family of panniers that go across.
And as a shop owner, it was so nice, because it was like, hey, this front rack or front bag works from your Vectron. Like I'm thinking of some of their front bags, and it can work on this bike. And I think that's one reason you see multiples of Terns in a family, because once they realize, like, oh, my cargo hold 37 works on this bike and it works on that bike, you can mix and match. And I think we're getting a lot of feedback on, switching to the Bosch Smart system, and people are like annoyed that they no longer can use batteries. And it's like, well, Bosch had a long run with the BES2.
Ridiculously long. I mean, that's been a crazy life cycle. And again, I think that speaks of where Tern are at, that desire to work with a product line that is going to be maintained. And so as that sort of the third iteration of Bosch, the BS2. So I'm not giving numbers and the names, or whatever.
That's what was on the BSD.
So as that gets kind of closed out, Bosch are committed that from the moment that last product rolls through a factory, so the very last of that motion battery goes onto a bike, they're committed to continue to manufacture spares for 6 years. And obviously, they're not going to run out at year 6. There's going to be, they're still going to have a lot of products. So if you are the lucky person to buy the very last one of those sold in the entire world, you've probably got a 10-year run of spares. It's not bad, and that's again, that's that thing with Tern. It's like, well, we haven't just partnered with the fanciest or the newest or whatever. We partnered with something that's absolutely dependable and solid and has backup and longevity, and it's good.
That's awesome.
And the DNA.
Yes. We're like 50 minutes into this, so if you've made it this far, you are really excited about the Orox. So Luke will have some in April. My guess is by the time they arrive, they will all be pre-sold. So
quite possibly.
Make sure you reach out to Luke. And I can't thank you enough. You are
you're welcome.
Beacon of hope on the Facebook groups, and just such a wonderful human. And to me, that's what's so wonderful about this niche of the bike industry, is like, we all just want to help each other and get more people on bikes. And it's not this competitive death match of pricing and things like that.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I think again, that's that DNA thing of Tern. It's a product line that is kind of a family thing. It's their bikes for everyone. And the Orox, even though it is probably the most out there bike, I suppose, that Tern have ever made, it's still a bike that virtually everybody could find a use for it if they want to, or have a task at hand. So I'm excited for that, seeing who and how people will use this bike. It's going to be really interesting.
Amazing. Well, I will put links to all of Luke's socials and websites, and especially that brilliant YouTube video, which brought me so much happiness on a very stressful week. So thank you.
You're bigging that video up too much. It's like a bad B-side.
Oh, I love it. It's what we need. Like we need more fun in this space for sure. Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you, Luke, for joining us, and everyone that's made it to the end. Thank you. Let us know what other questions, or if you're ordering Orox, which one you're picking up.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.